The name of the documentary. I hope I spelled it right. You can Google it. I mean, I can't be that much off his name, but I recommend his documentaries. They're not terribly long, I think. Yes, that's it. That's how you spell it. Okay. Let's go back to the text itself. I want to also address something else that someone asked in the break time just now. But anyway, I'll do that once we've gone through this text a little bit more. Okay, where did we get to in the? Yes, there's no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. That is still part of the path of meditation, and of course implicitly the path of meditation, explicitly the path of the emptiness of all those, the emptiness of all these different aspects. That's what explicitly is explained. So in particular, I mentioned it to someone yesterday, we have a very interesting tendency that although we perceive everything as inherently existent, some things seem to be more inherently existent than others. Okay, so something that we're attached to seems more inherently good than something we don't care about. Does that make sense? So a lot of our sense of inherent existence has to do with our emotional response to things. And what is really funny, when you turn to Buddhism, previously the Buddha was totally irrelevant to you. I mean, it didn't have anything to do with our personal life. It was maybe a statue of you put in your garden, right? I mean, people like to put statues in their garden. That was it. But slowly we understood the insignificance of a Buddha. We understood the significance of emptiness and certain concepts. And they, at some point, seem to be more inherently existent than my anger. Right? Something I want to get rid of doesn't seem, so my grasping onto its inherent existence is not as strong. My grasping at the inherent existence of my anger is not as strong as my grasping at the inherent existence of a Buddha's mind, or Buddha for that matter. So this is interesting how here towards the end, not only does it imply that the goal is the exalted wisdom, the attainment of Buddhahood, and so forth, which, as long as we have that root misperception, as I just said, we have a sense it's more inherently existent than everything ordinary. But then it stresses, there's no inherently existent exalted wisdom. There's no inherently existent attainment, nor any inherently existent non-attainment. So let's not over-solidify. Let's not perceive the goal as that concrete, because we're just transferring our sense of inherent existence onto these objects. Great. Okay, so this far is the path of meditation. And then it goes on to say, Shariputra, therefore, because there's no attainment, and so forth. So this is the last moment of the path of meditation, that Vajra-like, as it's sometimes called, indestructible. Vajra is another word. It also means diamond. So just as a diamond is indestructible, or, well, it's difficult to destroy it at least, a Vajra, also sometimes translated as thunderbolt, it has that direction, that connotation as well, of like being strong and powerful, indestructible. So the Vajra, especially in Tantra, plays a huge role. But here, in the sutric context, in fact, Vajra, the Tibetan word is Dorje. So Geshe Dorje Damdu, his first name is Vajra, actually. Anyway, so Vajra, like, means not indestructible, it has that connotation. So the last meditative state as a sentient being, the last in the continuum of a sentient being, or at the continuum of being a sentient being. So that last moment is what is indicated by these words. Shariputra, therefore, because there's no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Because at that moment, when you're absorbed in emptiness, the obscurations are no longer present. They haven't been overcome yet, right? It's like they say, a mind that eliminates obscurations, a mind realizing emptiness directly, that eliminates the different afflictions and so forth, the course I once fast, etc., the way we learned it yesterday. Such a mind, when it's present, the obscurations that it eliminates are already gone. But it's like the moment the mind arises, it's like you throw out the thief. The thief is outside, but you still have to close the door. Okay? So therefore, the moment you become a Buddha, the door is closed. In other words, the mind, the last time the Bodhisattva on the path of meditation enters the meditative equipoise, at that time, he's free already from the subtlest obscurations. But he hasn't closed the door yet. He hasn't made sure that they don't come back, in other words. So that moment is only when he becomes a Buddha. But on that level, he's already free from all obscurations. He just hasn't abandoned them yet. He hasn't eliminated them yet because he hasn't closed the door yet. Yeah. So anyway, and that is expressed here by these words. Shariputra, therefore, because there's no attainment, bodhisattvas dwell on the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration. Now, in that state, no obscuration. And without fear, of course, not the subtlest type of fears, nothing. There's no fear of the obscurations left, nothing. And this is a very subtle fear, of course, not what we ordinarily call fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. They reach this end point, which is nirvana, the nirvana of a Buddha. A moment later, that's what they reach. Okay, so that is the path of meditation, but the last moment just before Buddhahood is expressed by these words. And then the path of no more learning. No more learning. Done. That is Buddhahood. So Buddhahood it's for some people it's a little unusual to still call it a path. What is your goal? Right? They still see it as a path, but I guess you could say that the qualities of a path consciousness are still present in the mind of a Buddha. And now his effort is, of course, directed towards being of greatest benefit to others. Right? So yes, there's the goal, but for a Buddha, the work is just starting. There's nothing more to be accomplished. In that sense, it's a goal has been reached. But now the Buddha works towards the benefit of all sentient beings. So there's nothing more to learn, but still a lot to be done. Yeah, to work now most effectively for the benefit of all sentient beings. That is one way in which it's been explained to me, like why it's still a path. But another way is also that the qualities that a path require, they're now in that Buddha's continuum in the perfected form. I've perfected in the sense of in the best possible form. So therefore also still a path. But of course the Buddha has attained at the same time the ultimate goal. So we call his consciousness, his or her consciousness, from the perspective of what I just said. But from another perspective, we also call it the resultant state. All right. So all the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly, completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. So in that particular, here perfection of wisdom, of course, means the mind realizing emptiness. The perfection of wisdom, the sutras are just given the name as the cause. But perfection of wisdom actually refers to the mind realizing wisdom, and there's also a distinction between the path perfection of wisdom and the resultant perfection of wisdom. Path perfection of wisdom is when you practice wisdom in order to become enlightened. And in that case, it doesn't mean the wisdom that has gone to the other shore, but it actually means the wisdom that is going towards the other shore. Okay? Kind of not implying that you've reached your goal, that you're moving towards it. So the different interpretation as to what Prajna Paramita means, so the wisdom that has gone to the other shore, some masters like Baba Viveka would say, like for instance the Svatantrikas, they would say it means to have gone to the other shore. A bodhisattva doesn't have a perfection of wisdom in his or her continuum. But according to the Prasangika school, according to Chandakirti, for instance, it can be both. So going towards the other shore, which means you can have the perfection of wisdom in your continuum as a bodhisattva, that wisdom, realizing emptiness, but it's still a causal perfection of wisdom, while a Buddha has the resultant state, the wisdom that has gone to the other shore. Did you want to ask a question? Mm-hmm.
Can you explain a bit more on this Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times?
Yeah, like they dwell in the 3 times, they're all already in the future. No, it's a very popular way of speaking, like those who will be Buddhas in the future, those who have become enlightened in the past, who have become enlightened just now in the present, I guess, or in the process of becoming enlightened, and those in the futures. All of those will have relied on the perfection of wisdom, right? It's just weird to think of the future when it hasn't happened yet. Of course, it hasn't happened right now, but the future exists, except it doesn't exist now. We have a tendency to think if something exists, it must exist now. But that would be saying Mao Zedong exists? Yes, in general he does, but not now, right? Mao Zedong exists. So in philosophy we learn Mao Zedong exists, your future Buddhahood exists, but not now. Does that make sense? With certain things we don't know whether it's going to happen in the future, but that we all become enlightened, that is said to be certain. Therefore, a future Buddha exists. Your future Buddha exists. In general, just not now. Yeah? And it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Except usually when we say something exists, we say exists now. We have that sense right now. Okay. But philosophically, it's slightly different. Oh yes, James. Clarification?
I'm wrapping my head around enlightenment and then going back to...
Okay, that's a question. Can we wait?
Oh yeah, please.
Right?
Please.
Yes, okay. I'll make some time for questions. So keep it. If it's a clarification, I'll answer it. But if it takes a little longer, let's wait. Okay, great. So even if it's not answered this morning, then please remember for this evening. Okay, for this afternoon. Okay. All right. So now the conclusion. You've gone through the 5 paths and explicitly all the different types of emptiness presented here, and implicitly through the path. And now we've reached the part of the sutra that can be described as the conclusion. So now, in preparation to the mantra, it is said the mantra the mantra that will be cited in a moment, that explains exactly the same as everything we've explained, starting from the path of accumulation, starting from the answer by Avalokiteshvara. That's the long version. The long version, all the way from Shariputra, any son of the lineage, and any daughter of the lineage, starting from there, all the way to in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. That's Avalokiteshvara's answer, direct answer, but an extensive answer. Now he will recite the mantra, and in preparation to this mantra, he again summarizes the 5 paths. Yes, but just by the words like the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of, where do I have it? The mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra. So 5 times it mentions mantra, and each time it indicates one of the paths. Okay, 5 paths. So he's basically summarizing those, but the most concise answer he gives in the form of Tayata, Om. Some say you need to add Om, some say you can leave it. So Kungda Rinpoche, for instance, says you should have Om. Anyway, so Tayata Gate Gate, or Tayata Om Gate Gate Para Gate Para Sam Gate Bodhiya Soha. Okay, that is the short answer. It expresses, and we go through the mantra, but for those, it is said that those whose mind was ripe, who was ready, who totally was ready to receive these teachings on the Heart Sutra, just reciting the mantra was enough. If Avalokiteshvara had just cited the mantra, to them they would have fully understood this answer in answer to Shariputra's question. Seems unlikely. Like, what? What? Gata gata pada some gata. Everything we learned. Got that. But we never know. You know, some people, they, of course, their background, their knowledge, their wisdom, and so forth, all that may lead to the point that just a few words, as I said, just saying and they get it. Yeah, so that's a little longer than Gata gata pada gata, and so forth. Okay. All right, so what it says. So now it's saying, it's basically talking to those of grasping it quicker, but it's also a summary for everyone else. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom. What does mantra mean? What is the meaning of mantra? Right? Something that protects the mind. Very good. So mantra doesn't always literally refer to spoken words. They also serve the purpose of protecting the mind. So the etymology, or in other words, the meaning of the word mantra is literally to protect the mind. But there's so much that protects the mind, and that the perfection of wisdom protects the mind, I think is pretty obvious to us now, after everything we studied, everything we've heard, right? Okay, so therefore the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, path of accumulation. The mantra of great knowledge, path of preparation. The unsurpassed mantra, path of seeing. The mantra equal to the unequaled, path of meditation. The mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, path of no more learning. Should be known as truth, since it's not false. So in other words, the perfection of wisdom on those different levels, they protect the mind, and they're in accordance with the truth. They're not false. They're not in accordance with the misperception, but they're in accordance with the truth. Okay, so the mantra here is basically a summary, or it's a verbal expression of that perfection of wisdom on the different levels. Now here, the mantra of great knowledge is said to say that it saves from ignorance and imprints. So this mantra here, although it indicates the different path, but it's also saying that this perfection of wisdom, being of great knowledge, you have great knowledge when you have that perfection of wisdom, well, it saves us from ignorance and the imprints, the ignorance and other afflictions and their imprints. Yeah, that's what these words specifically mean, the mantra of great knowledge. And then the second, the unsurpassed mantra. That is said that it frees us also from suffering and its causes, and that there's nothing better to overcome suffering and its causes, plus the extremes of samsara and nirvana. Merely self-liberation, that's an extreme, because it prevents you from attaining the highest goal. You want to reach the highest goal for all sentient beings. So the unsurpassed mantra, this perfection of wisdom, is unsurpassed because not only does it free us from suffering and its causes, but there's nothing better to overcome the extreme of its nirvana and samsara. This is how the commentaries explain it to us. Yeah, so for a deeper appreciation of the qualities of this perfection of wisdom. Then the mantra equal to the unequaled. It helps us to reach this equal to the unequaled states of Buddhahood. Right? It helps us to reach, that is the unequaled state, that's the equal of the unequaled state, so the highest state, which is Buddhahood, and this mantra is therefore equal to the unequaled. That's what it says in Tibetan. Then the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, it removes all troubles of the world, together with their imprints. So not just ignorance, but all troubles of the world, together with all our tendencies. That should be known as truth. It accords with reality and is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Then, Tayata gate gate para samgate buddhi soha. Oh, my pronunciation is terrible. I apologize. Okay. So Tayata as well as is at the beginning of a mantra. So Tayata means kind of, it's like that. Tayata means it's like that. Consists of 3 letters. A, O, M. A, O, M, I believe. Those 3. And those are symbolic for the body, speech, and mind of a Buddha. The purified, these 3 letters stand for the purified version Om of a Buddha. So not Om, it's O-R-M, yeah, O-R-M. So those 3 come together in Om, and it's a very sacred syllable, not just in Buddhism, but in other, or sacred letter. No, it's a syllable, in English at least. So it's a very sacred sound, the sound of Om. And some, for instance, Kungtan Rinpoche says it should be added to the mantra. It isn't, when the Tibetans recite it, they leave out the Om, but it's recommended to actually cite it by Kungtan Rinpoche at least. So saying that this sacred, that symbolizes the body, speech, and mind of a Buddha, it's beautiful to hear that sound. So Tayata is like this, or so, it's like this. And then Gate means go. Gate. Gate, gate. 2 times go. Go, go. And then Paragate, go beyond. Parasamgate, go totally beyond. And Buddhya means be rooted in enlightenment. Be rooted in enlightenment. That's how it's usually explained. So really what it means is, it is thus, or it is like this. Om, which is hard to translate. Go, go, go beyond, go totally beyond, be rooted in enlightenment. So the first 2 goes, gate, gate, describe the path of accumulation. So proceed, go on the path of accumulation and path of preparation. Sorry, it describes both. First gate, path of accumulation. The second gate, path of preparation. So it's just ordinary gate, gate. It's not like beyond and so forth, because you haven't realized emptiness directly yet, right? Usually on that level, you haven't realized in general. Can be some exceptions, but I'm not going to go into them. So gate, gate, the first 2 gates are the path of accumulation and the path of preparation. Okay, I tell you the exception. When you've already gone through the fundamental vehicle, you've already become an arhat, then you have realized emptiness already, before you've entered the path of seeing. So this much I should say. But that's an exception. And here, what is recommended? To start to enter the Mahayana path, or the universal vehicle path, from the outset. It's quicker, because there's no danger of you being caught in that blissful experience of the cessation of suffering, which you remain in for a long time, and during that time you can't work for the benefit of sentient beings from a bodhisattva's point of view, right? From a Buddha's point of view. Therefore, it's quicker if you actually enter the fundamental vehicle path, and then you become an arhat, and right afterwards enter the Mahayana path, it's quicker. It's quicker to go through but a lot of people, because the main goal when you enter the Hinayana path, the main goal is self-liberation, you remain in that state for a while. And that is seen as wasting time in terms of benefiting sentient beings, just from that perspective, from a Mahayana perspective. It's debatable, but at least just to give you that version. Okay, so gate, gate, then paragate is the path of seeing, go beyond, and then go totally beyond, because you're taking it even further. Go beyond, realize emptiness directly, and eliminate the acquired afflictions, and then go totally beyond, as in like remove everything else that's in the way to Buddhahood, until you're rooted in emptiness, in enlightenment, sorry. Bodhiya soha, being rooted in enlightenment. So it's really the short version. Of course, it's actually more the implicit explanation of the 5 paths, but explicitly perfection of wisdom, therefore phenomena lack inherent existence, that is also explicitly said to be expressed in here. But this is the summary of everything else, and that's the mantra. And there's a whole discussion here, because mantras are usually part of Tantra. They're usually part of Tantra. And there's some disagreement by the different commentators. Is it therefore a Tantric text or a Sutric text? Well, I think the common consent is that it is a Sutric text. But for instance, Kungtan Rinpoche says it's a text that prepares us for Tantra. Because it's got this mantra, which is quite unusual for a Sutric text. Therefore, it's a path, it's a text in preparation, preparing the mind for Tantra. Though, of course, there are many texts that prepare the mind for Tantra. In fact, all sutra texts prepare the mind for Tantra, actually. Those of the fundamental vehicle as well as those of the ultimate vehicle, the universal vehicle. As you remember, what we need to practice Tantra are renunciation, bodhicitta, and the view of emptiness. So renunciation, I just want to correct something I said yesterday, not to misunderstand. I spoke about renunciation yesterday in a looser sense of the word. Being able to give away anything, having no difficulty to give away your stuff, or that is renunciation more in a looser sense, like renunciation not in the literal sense of the word. But actually, renunciation, the way it is defined, and even not just in English, but also in Tibetan, you can use it in a looser sense. Oh, come on, don't accumulate too much stuff. Have a little bit of renunciation. But that's not literal renunciation. Literally, renunciation is a mind that wishes to be liberated. Right? It doesn't specify for yourself or others, because before you generate bodhicitta, you must have renunciation. The wish to be free from the limitations of samsara. That's an important point. Yeah, so just love and compassion. I haven't had the time to discuss this, but when we say the wish to be free for all sentient beings from suffering, what does that suffering include? Just suffering of suffering? No. Suffering of change and pervasive conditional suffering, or compounded pervasive suffering, which means samsara. Right? Any kind of samsaric experience, you wish for them to be free from that. That is what great compassion is. I keep saying suffering and its causes, right? So suffering includes not just the suffering of suffering, but also suffering of change and pervasive conditioned suffering. As we know, the three types. You can, of course, learn about them more in the Lamrim text. They're very clearly explained. And so, therefore, renunciation means, let me finish with compassion. Compassion is the wish. So what is your focus? All sentient beings. And the wish for them to be free from all samsaric experiences. All samsaric experience, which is another way of saying all types of suffering, including, and most importantly, conditioned pervasive suffering, having the 5 aggregates, contaminated aggregates. Why do I need renunciation before that? Because that is a very similar mind in that I wish myself to be free from exactly that. To be free from any type of samsaric experience, or in other words, be free from the 3 types of suffering, most specifically be free from pervasive conditioned suffering, that is the 5 aggregates. Does that make sense? So, that being the case, first I need to understand myself, what are the shortcomings. And once I understand the shortcomings, my natural response will be, I want to be free from that. And when I understand that, due to my affectionate love, due to my closeness to other sentient beings, it's like in the same way as I wish for myself to be free from it, since I hold sentient beings to be very close, I have a natural response, may they be free from it. Does that make sense? Our mind feels very close to the I, right? To the conventional I, which of course I perceive to exist inherently, but it's mixed. My perception of myself is mixed with the conventional and the inherent existent I. So anyway, it feels close to the I, and therefore, understanding the shortcomings of samsara, right now I only understand the shortcomings of the suffering of suffering. So I naturally wish to be free from the suffering of suffering. Right? And if there's someone very close to me, I wish them to be free from the suffering of suffering. But that's not enough. I learn then what are the disadvantages also of the other types of sufferings that right now I don't experience as suffering, that I'm attached to, which prevents me from looking for anything greater but ordinary happiness. And therefore, I need to first generate a mind that understands the shortcomings of these limiting experiences. And when I understand these shortcomings because of my feeling of closeness to myself, to my 5 aggregates. Therefore, there's the natural wish to be free from them. But now I want to have other sentient beings feel just as close. Yeah, so I meditate on the fact that they've all been my mother in the past, that they're like myself, that there's no difference really between us. And based on that, I generate affectionate love. Remember in the meditation, I always say a feeling of closeness, of seeing them as important, as with a sense of acceptance and so forth. So this feeling of affection, it's a feeling of closeness. And when you feel close to them, and we reflect on the suffering of samsara, then you want them to be free from it. And that's called great compassion. But no, not yet great compassion. When then also you take personal responsibility in the form of thinking, may I, the wish at least, to help them to overcome those, that's when I call great compassion. That leads to the altruistic attitude, the determination to do so, to protect them in that way, not just the wish. And then, of course, enlightenment. Bodhicitta. My apology. I misspoke. I meant bodhicitta, of course. Does that all make sense? Yes. So, renunciation, I can get on the basis of the fundamental vehicle. Beautifully laid out. So the Theravada vehicle, the fundamental vehicle. Therefore, from a universal point of view, universal vehicle point of view, every sutra, non-tantric teaching is a preparation for Tantra. But for some reason, Kungtan Rinpoche feels because of this mantra, it's like not just a preparation. I guess what he means is also it's like a bridge between Sutra and Tantra. Does that make sense? Okay, great. All right. Almost done. And now, finally, the Buddha talks. Right? Finally. Okay, this we can finish. This is the end of it. So we finish that in the afternoon. Okay, take that break between this part. So Avalokiteshvara's answer, we completed that in the extensive part of that and the short version, which is the mantra. And now I want to just address one thing. That someone asked about guilt, and in that connection also collective guilt. I addressed it in the guilt I experienced being German without a German history, but she put it in the context of being Russian. I mean, in this situation, which I was like, why do you feel guilty? Like that was my first reaction. You're not supporting Putin, but okay, it needs to be explained. This is really, really important. And I also mentioned that I was always surprised when I met Americans, like many of the Emory students would say, when we went to Iraq. And I would say, you went to Iraq? And they're like, no, my government. Yeah, but you didn't. Yeah, but we're American. And I was like, how interesting, right? I mean, I never felt really bad about it. And I was like, but you didn't do it. But by association. Well, anyway, so we had discussions on that. But I think, first of all, we need to deal with guilt. Guilt. There are certain emotions that are not afflictive emotions, but they're still harmful. And they're all extreme versions of an ordinary emotion that is not harmful. So as I said, all our misperceptions are extreme. All our afflictions are extreme, and there are certain responses that are not afflictions, that are not misperceptions, but they're still extreme because of their causes, like the root misperception being extreme. And some of those are extreme fear, not just the subtle fear, but extreme fear. Luca, if that's what you wanted to get at, no?
Wrong views.
Wrong view, okay, yes, of course, absolutely, wrong view. wrong view in the sense of denying the existence of something that does exist, which is not the root misperception, because that adds more onto it. But even that extreme view that adds onto the existence of things can lead to a view that denies the existence of something. It deprecates. It's a deprecating view. Versus a superimposing view of adding something. Okay, having said all that, guilt is one of them. And it's just as self-hatred, which is an extreme version of just being critical with your own, just being critical, being realistic. Okay, I have certain faults, I need to work on them. But then self-hatred exaggerates those, the negativity of those, and doesn't see the positive qualities. And yeah, perfection, a wish for perfection is also connected to that. I need to be perfect. And when I'm not, I don't like myself. I'm critical with myself. Those are all extreme responses that don't accord with reality, and they harm us. Now, guilt, as I said, is one of those. What is the normal version, the non-extreme version of guilt? Very good, very good. Who said it? Oh, very good, very good. Jack. Regret. Just regret. I made a mistake, that was wrong. I'm sorry for it. That's it. Now, guilt, and I'm not even talking about collective guilt, right? Because you're seeing already, how can collective guilt for someone else I should have regret? Doesn't make sense actually, right? But let's then take it to guilt. Let's take just good old ordinary guilt because I've done something. Not by association, but I've done something. So I regret this. But then it goes like, but I'm so bad. I've done this. I am so bad. And even though my mistake lies in the back, lies in the past, it's like I'm doing it all over again, right? It's like my mistake is still here, right in my face. I'm so bad. I made this mistake. It's kind of like being obsessed, being a victim, for instance, or feeling so victimized, taking it into the present. We had that whole discussion. Now you no longer apply that term. You're no longer a victim if right now nothing happens to you, which is why the term can be used, but only in a specific context. Then when you were a victim, not now. Okay, furthermore, carrying this guilt there. Furthermore means, similarly, you're taking this guilt into the present. I'm making this mistake over and over again in each moment. It's long gone, but it's still there. So it's an exaggeration. Exaggeration means that which is actually changing moment by moment. You solidify it to such a degree that it remains the same now. It's still here. And you're just this failure, basically, that you regret. This feeling of guilt. Here it's not like hatred so much. Hatred is involved as well. You may hate yourself. But at other times, I feel so bad. What have I done? What did I do? Right? It's an interesting emotion. Tibetans don't have a word for it. They do have a word for it, actually, but no one uses it. They can use it, but it's really just a strong sense of regret. And I'm not sure it really conveys the same kind of guilt. That extreme crippling. It's crippling us, right? And I meet parents sometimes. You see, like, this is our problem in the West. Our relationship with our parents. I've said it before, and I just come back to it. I don't think I've observed that parents love their children less. No, that hasn't changed. Parents don't change. They're more unrealistic now. Parents are more unrealistic, that they feel I have to totally protect my child from any kind of suffering. You can protect your children from a lot of suffering, not from all suffering, but this obsession of wanting to do that, and sometimes you don't expose them to reality, and it can be good. A healthy amount of just knowing about what's going on in the world without scaring them can be healthy. But besides that, besides sometimes spoiling children, not everyone does, of course, but the love of parents for their children hasn't changed. But what has changed has the love of children for their parents, and that is terrible. It leads to a lot of unhappy, lonely, elderly people who are just left alone to fend for themselves because their children don't want to be around them. They love them enough to maybe spend a few hours on Christmas or send a card here and there, but that's it. And there's so much loneliness at a time when elderly people are totally helpless. They cannot do the same that they used to be able to do. And if our parents when we were so helpless, looked after us, and were responsible for our survival, how can we neglect them now? Now, our problem is that we misunderstood Sigmund Freud, taking it to an extreme. Sorry, I'm losing guilty, but I'm getting back to guilty. I just want to make this point. We're focusing on negativities to understand our problems. That's fine. Understand the causes for our problems. But even though our parents, of course, made mistakes, but no one is born to be a parent. No one was trained to be a good parent. What is good parenting? What one person perceives to be good parenting, I might totally agree with it, depending on the person and so forth. So the problem is that we perceive it as inherently bad. I've been messed up by this person. And what do we ignore? The good stuff. We should spend equal time appreciating all that's gone well. The good things. That's just fair to them as well, isn't it? Because they've also done good things, to focus on them. If you want to do this, and it can be helpful to understand a problem, but spend also some time, where are my good qualities? What did my parents teach me? And don't forget, if you're blaming your parents, spend some time blaming your grandparents and their parents and their parents and their parents. Because if I'm a victim of my parents, your parents are a victim of their parents, right? So actually this whole blaming, it stops at the grandparents. We like the grandparents. We're close to them. But we have a problem with the parents. But the parents are the product of the grandparents. But shouldn't we then also blame them for some time? And then go back? But that's exhausting, so we don't do it. Okay? Therefore, I think it's so important to reconsider our relationship with our parents. Really reconsider. And just think of the first 9 months. When I'm in Israel, it's a really good, easy way to explain this. I'm saying, how difficult is it to carry a full plate of hummus in your belly? But then be pregnant for 9 months with something that's even heavier. We all know hummus is really good. Hummus, it really stays with you for a while, and you take a whole plate with pita bread and it's really heavy. But then, it's a good joke in Israel, what about carrying a baby for 9 months, right? And then you have to pee all the time. And I've never been pregnant, but I've seen them running to the bathroom all the time. Anyway, I don't need to go into it. 9 months. Just that, if there's a person who for 9 months carries you through McLeodganj to protect you, wouldn't you be extremely grateful for them? Feeding you and clothing you, you're totally protected from all the danger, and they keep carrying you around. Wouldn't you be really grateful for them? Well, that's exactly what your mother did for 9 months. Okay, you started off being the size of a pea, but at some point it was a lot more than that, heavier than a plate of hummus, right? Okay, pressing in all the directions and messing up her figure for good. No, I wouldn't say that to all the mothers. I'm not saying your figure is messed up for good. But I'm saying, right? Yeah, there's a lot of stretching in places that's painful, of course. And yeah, things have changed from now on. So anyway, just this much. Isn't that a very good reason for incredible gratitude? And to focus on that as well. That's just healthy. And we'll continue with guilt after the break. Okay, coming back to that. All right. Thank you and enjoy your break.